oh wow, like I want to chase this. And at that point it was like, I'm addicted to this. Like I want to get this feeling over and over. And it kind of just gave me this big push of momentum, into my 10, 11, 12, 13 years, to the point where 3 years later, I had my first Olympic trials cut at 13.
You're listening to an Apex Mindset episode of the RCN podcast, where we learn from inspiring individuals who push the boundaries to reach extreme levels of success. Apex Mindset. Elevate your life. On this episode of Apex Mindset, the 8-time world champion, 2-time Olympian in Athens, Greece, and Beijing, China, 3-time Olympic swimming medalist, entrepreneur, and TEDx speaker, Katie Hoff.
I was really in love with, I kind of fall in love with the sport. I was passionate. I wanted to wear my swimsuit to bed. I was all about it. But I still hadn't really developed that intensity in terms of being competitive. My teammates were beating me, and suddenly this light bulb went off, and I was like, I want to put my hand on the wall first, and I want to be the winner.
And then it's Riley, and then it's Rice, followed by Bardock, but the crowd gets behind the American. They can sense a world record here. Katie Hoff doing it well. She has about 60.
All right, we got this, empty the tank, go for it. And I remember kind of questioning myself in a good way, am I? Am I giving it every ounce of energy right now?
But it's all Hoff, the defending champion.
I had this kind of click moment in terms of being able to push into that extra gear of discomfort. And I called it the deep down gear, which I still call it that.
A world record, Katie Hoff. Katie Hoff.
Welcome to the Apex Mindset podcast. Today we are excited to have a very special guest with us, Katie Hoff. Welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be chatting with you guys.
We are excited to have you and introduce you to our audience who don't know yet. So in order to do that, we're going to start from the beginning. We love to dig into the backgrounds and kind of walk through the journey of your life. So let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up and what was home life like?
Yeah, so I'm actually, a lot of people don't know this. I'm a West Coast girl. I was born in Northern California, just outside of Palo Alto, a place called Sunnyvale. And I would say kind of pretty normal upbringing. My parents were really supportive of me through and through, from, being born to now, really let me be in the driver's seat, I would say. And I was also a very particular, precocious, almost borderline OCD little kid just from the start. I don't know how much has changed, to be honest with you. But, from lining up my dolls a specific way where, I would throw a massive tantrum if even one arm was out of place, I've been told, which concerned my parents a little bit. But yeah, I was just came out that way and always kind of knew exactly what I wanted and, never wavered. It was, this is what I want and I'm going to go after that. At the time that was, specific food or specific outfit. I remember even a time I have this picture of a family picture where I think it's 100 degrees out. And I insisted that I was going to wear tights and a leotard, just out to this specific photo shoot with my brother, and my mom lost the battle with me and again, put me in the driver's seat. And that was that. And we still have that picture. But yeah, my family was out there in California until I was about 5. And then at 5, we, for different job changes with my dad and wanting to be a lot closer to my grandparents on the East Coast in Virginia, we ended up moving to Williamsburg, Virginia when I was 5. And that was kind of my first interaction with water.
That's awesome. Which you kind of would think California near the coast, maybe it was there, but, I guess age plays into it as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did, the mommy and me, and like I knew, like if I had been, jumped in the ocean, I would be able to survive. But in terms of actual, oh, this is a swim team, and oh, this is a competitive type of thing, our summer league team in our neighborhood in Williamsburg was my first interaction with that.
So tell us a little bit about when you first got into swimming. Obviously, this is the journey that you ended up down. What was it like in the beginning?
So, not great. I was a really small, skinny, could not keep weight on little kid. And so I just shivered for a year straight. I started doing summer league at 5, and wanted to stop after a year just because I was so cold, constantly shaking. My mom, again, just kind of like I said, like they put me in the driver's seat. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to focus on tap, jazz, and ballet, getting my splits down. And they were like, great, do that. As long as I was doing something and setting goals around something, they were fine and happy. And after about a year, I kind of had this pull where I was like, I kind of want to, get back into swimming. I miss it. And this time I was 7 and I joined a year-round team. So, I think I maybe went twice a week still, nothing crazy, but I was doing it, all year round and not just for a couple of months in the summer. And at that point, I was really in love with, like, I kind of fall in love with the sport. I was passionate. I wanted to wear my swimsuit to bed. Like, I was all about it. But I still hadn't really developed that intensity in terms of being competitive until I would say maybe about a year later, a year into it, I started looking around and realizing that, while pink and purple are my favorite colors, that was, 7th and 8th place. My teammates were beating me, and suddenly this light bulb went off, and I was like, I don't love this. Like, I want to put my hand on the wall first, and I want to be the winner. And from that point on, a monster was kind of reborn and all of my OCD qualities and, being particular transferred into the pool.
And you hear a lot about, about parents pushing, and it doesn't seem like that was the case for your upbringing at all. It was just kind of intrinsic. It was part of you. For people who kind of, they don't know, they don't feel that pull or that call, what do you equate to finding that thing? Was it something that you were searching for actively at that age?
It's funny because I think I have a brother and he's about 3.5 years younger than me. And I think, I kind of fell into it. It was just like, okay, like I want to do this. Again, from the age of, 1 or 2 years old, I saw something, I was going after it. That was just my personality. My brother had more of a personality where he needed kind of a nudge in the right direction. And my mom and dad were able to see, okay, here are his strengths. He's really into music, really helping him stay motivated and pushing him in the right direction. So I think, for parents, it's being able to identify your kid's personality and then riding with that. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was just like my parents just needed to be like, get out of her way, support her, drive her to practice, make sure she's getting the right nutrients, love, support, all that. And for my brother, it was, same thing, but, helping him, he's never, and he'll tell you this, is not the most decisive person. And so having, my parents kind of point him like, hey, like, you're pretty good at this, like, we should put you in this, which was not swimming for him. He's not, a swimmer, which I think was good to have separate things. But my parents were just very intuitive when it came to the way that their children were wired.
So you, obviously we hear you got into it. You found that was something you loved doing. Tell us the journey from that, so you were 7 or so, kind of really starting to dive in. Take us on the journey from there to where you really got competitive and you were getting into those teams. I know you got into, championships and then obviously into the Olympics. What's that kind of journey look like?
Yeah, so it's kind of a fast journey once everything clicked. I mean, from I would say the age of 9, which is when I made my first, it's called zone. So it's like a regional meet where you're on your state team. So I was Team Virginia. And it feels like kind of a mini Olympics. You get all the team gear, you're representing your state, you go to this big meet, and you have to be top 2 in the state to qualify, similar to top 2 in the nation to qualify. And so I think the moment, or the reason I made that team at 9 was I had this kind of click moment in terms of being able to push into that extra gear of discomfort. And I called it the deep down gear, which I still call it that. But I would say, I think early 9, like that season, I literally can remember it clear as day. We were doing this super hard set, repeats of 50 yards, so up and back as fast as you can go, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And my coach was, I don't respond well to someone yelling at me. I respond well to someone yelling for me, and that was the coach that I had. And so he was yelling for us, like, hey guys, like, all right, we got this, like, empty the tank, go for it. And I remember being tired, breathing hard, but imagining this, like, empty the tank kind of hit me in a way where I was like kind of questioning myself in a good way. Like, am I giving it every ounce of energy right now? And I was like, all right, man, let's just experiment here. I'll kick a little harder and increase my tempo and see what happens. And I remember being like, well, this is really painful. This is way more painful. But I was repping seconds in a 50, which, if you know anything about something like that, does not happen. Like, I started, beating my teammates, and I'm sure they thought at that point I was having this moment, but I'm sure they were like, save up. She was probably saving up. But no, I was just having this realization of, oh, like, I can push to this super intense area of discomfort, but look what it's giving me. And obviously I wasn't, breaking state records or doing anything in that moment of practice, but it was enough where I was like, oh wow, like, I want to chase this. And at that point it was like, I'm addicted to this. Like, I want to get this feeling over and over. And then to have it manifest itself later that season, where I did start breaking state records, and I did make the zones team, and it kind of just gave me this big push of momentum, into my 10, 11, 12, 13 years, to the point where 3 years later, I had my first Olympic trials cut at 13.
Wow. Yeah. And in your book Blueprint, which is amazing, by the way, I really connected with it. There's this little note that I think it was kind of an insight into how unique your perspective was at such a young age. And you were watching 2 other girls.
Yeah.
And and at such a young age, you were finding deep down, and then you were also just looking at things differently and driving yourself. Could you kind of explain that?
Yeah, so first I'll explain kind of I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like a little mediocrity. And my ghostwriter, when we first sat down to work together to write this book, had given me kind of a project of something. A mentor of his had said, hey, this is a really great thing to do for kind of insight into the psyche of someone you're working with, you're ghostwriting with. And so each week we would have our sessions where we would, talk it out, and I would just kind of word vomit all over him my story, and he would give me these topics. And so I got to choose. It'd be like 3 different words, and I would choose, and then it was like, I just want you to free flow, whatever comes to your mind, get it out on the page, and then send it to me. And so I'm doing this, like, awesome, great, like, perfect. I'll give him some insight into my psyche. No one's ever going to read this. Like, I'm going to be just brutally, vulnerably honest. And so and he was like loving them. Each week he was like, yes, amazing. I'm like, oh, perfect. He's really getting to know me. And then towards the end, when we're kind of putting everything together, he's like, you know what? I really feel like we should put these in the book. And I was like, oh God, well, there's some stuff in there where I am just lay it out on the line. And I was like, but you know what? Like, that, again, like, that's why I wrote the book. Like, I wanted people to be able to see, everything, and not shielding anything, not sugarcoating anything. And so that's really ultimately why I agreed. And so this excerpt is literally me being the most judgmental person on the planet at, I think, like 11 years old, seeing these girls come out from a mall, like, walking along. I think they're like, sucking down milkshakes or something, and have shopping bags. And I'm on my way to practice on a Saturday afternoon. And I think that I said to my dad, like, look at those girls. Like, I never want to be like those girls. And my dad challenged me and was like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't even know what they're doing, who they are, their background, nothing. You just snapshot judged. And it was more what was behind that was I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going and doing a second practice. I'm working for 4 hours on a Saturday. Like, I'm going towards, like, I want to feel extraordinary. I'm going towards a goal. And maybe those girls were going towards a goal and like they had already worked, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know that. But what it really shows is just my mindset of how much disdain I had towards mediocrity. Like that was my greatest fear. Sharks are up there, but like mediocrity for me was like, I don't want to be that. And I need to be extraordinary, and I'm going to access whatever gear I need to access in order to make that happen.
Yeah, which is rare. I mean, it's and I think it's why obviously you got to where you did, and you know, we're in the Olympics so young, and it, like you talked about with the kind of finding that extra bit inside of you, right? You were swimming, but when you actually made that thought of, am I actually emptying that tank? That's where you really started exceeding to that next level. And so many people aren't willing to even find that place because, like you said, it's a little more painful, it's a little more uncomfortable, and people like to stop at that comfort line. So I love that you share that. I think that's a great takeaway for people, is really thinking anytime you're doing something, are you really actually giving your full effort there?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about your first Olympics.
Yeah, so it was kind of a whirlwind after that point from, age 11, 12, 13. My parents and my family moved from Virginia to Baltimore a year out from 2004 to join North Baltimore Aquatic Club, which is obviously the club that, made Michael Phelps. And I actually worked with a different coach though, and he and I hit it off immediately, had a great relationship from the start. And the momentum that I had that year, like I remember coming in a year out, meeting with him in his office and just laying out my goals. Like, hey, if I could, at this point, I'm probably ranked I think I'm maybe ranked 9th or 10th in the nation in my, individual medley events, which at the time were my best, continued to be my best. If I could just be in the finals, fighting in the finals, that would be a great spot so that it can prepare me and give me experience for 2008. Never thinking that I was, I probably had another 10, 12 seconds to drop in my 400 IM and another, 4 or 5, which is a lot at that point of where I was at in my 200 IM, not thinking I would do that in a year. And within that year, I improved so much, just joining a new team, getting stronger. My lower body was like the weakest thing ever. I built that strength up. And so 3 months out, we went to a meet and I recorded the fastest time in the nation that year in the 400 IM. And it was like, oh, wow. Like, it's just, this just got serious. And my bullseye just really shifted. And yeah, I mean, I went into the trials pretty terrified, not definitely at that point wanting to make the Olympic Games. Screwed up royally in the prelims because I was so nervous. I gained 10 seconds, got 6 going into finals because I just messed up, rookie mistake. And but then ended up rebounding that night, winning the 400 IM right off the American record, and then also winning the 200 IM. And then I think the biggest takeaway from all of that is all I was thinking about, because my target had switched so many times, was just make the team. I never even thought, once you make the team, that means you go to the Olympic Games and you swim in the Olympic Games. And that was my first national team. I'd never been away from my parents for longer than a week. I'd never been out of the country. I was just this wide-eyed, just turned 15, naive, homeschooled kid. And my first games didn't go well for all of those reasons. I didn't have the confidence to do the exact same thing in the prelims in Athens, ended up not making the finals, ended up throwing up all over the pool deck because the race was so painful. Just kind of a disaster in a word.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that's a very pivotal point in my career where it was like, all right, like, are you letting this break you and are you done? or are you gonna pick yourself back up and keep fighting?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, and in hearing that, you were so young and like going at challenges that the vast majority of the population in this world have nothing to do with, on that level. Were there any kind of mental tactics or strategies that you developed as you're going through that to deal with that kind of pressure and like shifts and change?
Not really. I think even back then, right, that was 17 years ago, mental health and at least in my world wasn't as prolific as it is now. And I was just kind of battling on my own. I didn't even have my coach there because, they kind of select the Olympic team coaches. And so he wasn't able to be on the pool deck when we were traveling. My parents actually weren't even able to come because it was so sudden that I made the team. There's all these older kids and there were definitely, mentors and coaches who were wonderful to me and super supportive. But in terms of, hey, this is a lot, you're 15, like let's talk about it, there just wasn't a lot of that back then.
Tell us about your mindset at that moment, and then leading into one of our favorites that we've watched is your Melbourne race. So tell us about that little journey right there to where you had that comeback.
Yeah, so flew back from Athens, definitely kind of licking my wounds and kind of figuring out a next step strategy. For me, I don't think there was ever a moment where it was like, am I not going to keep doing this? There was definitely, obviously I had some cries and, some sadness, but it was like, okay, well, how do I get back up? How do I get redemption? Like, I still wanted to win Olympic medals. Like, to me, just making, I know it sounds bad, but just making an Olympic team, like that wasn't, I wanted world records. I wanted Olympic gold medals. I wanted all of that. And so my kind of, extraordinary need and goal was still very firmly planted deep down in me. And so I think that's what really kind of picked me up by my suit straps and was like, all right, let's go. And I think the biggest piece was, other than my amazing parents and friends who, huddled around me, but my coach and I sat down and basically said, okay, like let's figure out a strategy. And I know some people this works for, some people it doesn't, but I need data. Like, I can't just sit there and say I'm just gonna, throw it out there and say, I can do this. I believe in myself. Like, if I don't have something to actually concrete hold on to, it doesn't work very well for me. It's just how I am. And so he was like, we are going to do things and make this huge kind of process and vault of sets and work that you have done, so that when you get back to, the upcoming year, which would have been the World Championships, when you are at that meet and you are looking back and you are feeling fearful of this 400 IM, because the 400 IM conquered me in Athens. It conquered me. I did not win. And so all I wanted to do was swing back at it. And so, he basically came up with the craziest sets. Like, one of them was called the hell set, that I had to go through and deal with and fight through, so that by the time I was going to face the 400 IM again, it was like, it's a 400 IM compared to the like crazy beast of sets that I've done.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Of course I'm going to believe in myself, And so that's what we did. I mean, that the year after 04, my training was ridiculous in terms of the stuff that I was doing. And I ended up kind of claiming redemption, winning 3 gold medals at that World Championships in 05, breaking my first American record, but turning pro that year. But I still, at that point, the race you're talking about is 3 years down the line. So I still felt like, okay, like I'm here to stay. I've proven I'm not like a flash in the pan. I've got this. But like the 400 IM, like to me, the ultimate is breaking the world record. Like that's my only.
Yeah.
I'm fighting back. I'm punching the 400 IM in the face. I have redemption. I'm conquering it. And that is literally what happened in 2007 at the World Championships in Australia. I broke the world record and kind of finally had that, like you see in my reaction, like that moment of like, oh my gosh, like I finally did it 3 years later of just so much work and sweat and blood and many tears to make that happen.
I love that you commented and you say being relentless. that was a key for you. A lot of people, they look at it and they're like, oh, that's obsessive, and from like a negative standpoint. But how integral do you think that is for success in anything?
Oh, it's everything. I am such a, like, you hit it on the head when people say like, oh, you're obsessive, or oh, it's like, you don't get it. Ultimately.
Yeah.
Like, I think like anytime to me, it's amazing to be obsessed with something, consumed with something that you're passionate about. Like, that is a gift. And I think that's what is, like, if you're not passionate about something and you don't have this, need to accomplish something like I did, and I think, anyone who's successful does, it's impossible to be obsessed. You can't will yourself to be obsessed. You can't will yourself to be relentless. It has to come first with that, passionate thing that you need and you just need it. You don't want it, you need it.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times when people say things like that, it's just unfortunate that they just haven't found that yet. And of course, as that obsessive person, right, you're kind of always fighting with yourself on the seesaw of like, okay, you also need balance in your life, and you need to have that perspective. Like, everyone kind of is fighting that little tug of war too. But I would much rather have it the way of being obsessive and then having to kind of like, all right, like, I need to relax, or I need to find a way to find some balance here and there. But anytime, I'm obsessive about something, I'm like, yes, because then it's just happening for you. Once you're obsessed and you're locked in, it's just happening, which is kind of a really special, unique, and cool thing to have happen to you.
Yeah. Love that point. And I love our mutual friend, Jesse Itzler, is the one that I always think about when we're talking about the balance side, is like taking, like you're talking about with the relentless, like obsessive. I've definitely gotten those comments before, but applying it in all areas. Like, it doesn't even have to be in just one, but apply it to when you're swimming, or when you're working, or when you're working on your startup, or whatever it is. We're like 120% into it. But then when you get home, 120% into your home. And when you're, so whatever it is that you're working on, finding that way to apply your passion into each of those areas, I think is how you make that balance, right? It's never actually balanced, but that's how you create something that feels balanced.
100%.
Yeah. And the note that you brought up, I think that is the main differentiator, is that you found something that you're passionate about, that your love, for it makes it a need, and you're connected with it. Everyone is going to have to do something relentlessly, whether they want to or not. You go into a job, you have to, there's a price to pay to be in this world. And so I think the people that look at it from the negative standpoint, they never found that, and it's sad. But it's great to hear from people that are passionate and they have connected, they have found that. And I don't know, it sounds so encouraging from your perspective, where you're like, look at what I've accomplished. That is amazing, but here's what you have to do. You have to find that thing. And you're going to be applying that same amount of energy that you would for maybe another discipline that you aren't passionate about. But keep looking until you find that, is kind of the message that I'm getting from you. So thank you, for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think, I do have both sides of it too. I think a lot of times people will look at me and be like, yeah, okay, well, you literally got it at 9. Like, how cool for you, and how lucky you are that you just kind of, fell into this passion. But when it all stopped and the swimming was done and I had to retire, I had to start over too at age 25. And all I felt was like, oh, wow, I'm super behind everybody else now. Like, that's truly how I felt. And, it took me a long time to realize, like, okay, but all the qualities that you built and established and developed over the course of a 20-year career, those didn't go away. You just have to, again, now find that new passion, which easier said than done, but at least like, okay, like, I still have these set of qualities that I have developed, and those can now be applied to, a new thing.
So I know we're going to pack a little bit here in at the end with the time we have left. So, but I do want to go back to that point of what your transition looked like, because, you know, those that don't know your story, you didn't just finish the Olympics and decide to retire, right? Like you had adversity that came up, you had some challenge that arose that was unexpected, that kind of hit you out of nowhere, which caused some of that change. And I just want people to hear a little bit about your thought and your process there. You know, not letting that completely just defeat you, but what your outlook looked like. So what was that story of having to end swimming and then transition into your new role?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it came definitely later in my career in terms of, fortunately it didn't happen, before 2008, before kind of my main Olympics. But, both the kind of the precursor to this is in 2004, I was a baby. I was a rookie. I didn't really enjoy any of the Olympics. I was just swirling. 2008, I had a successful meet. I won 3 Olympic medals, but I swam 5 events, and I was swimming 8 days straight, and I had these expectations of being coined the female Michael Phelps, and I didn't really enjoy that Olympics either. I was just so stressed out of my mind that I didn't get to stop and say, like, Team USA is on my cap. I'm representing my country. Like, this is really amazing. I didn't have enough of those moments of appreciation. And so, to speed ahead, I had some sickness in 2012, didn't make it in 2012, but decided to make a comeback for 2016 and really had found my groove and rhythm, and was just enjoying the process. Felt like I was really empowered and in control of my training and swimming really fast. And so leading up to, the 2016 games, there's a lot of meets that are kind of pre-qualifiers to World Championships, which is a year out of the Olympics, other World Cup type meets. And so I was primed for our nationals in 2014, flew from Miami to California and started having these weird chest pains. And it was like very, very minor. Like I would say like, oh, am I getting a cold? Which obviously as an athlete, 3 days out from a meet, you're like ignoring it. You're like, okay, I have a cold. I've swum through worse. And so it kind of progressed to the point where it moved to stabbing pains in my, right rib area, and ultimately forced me to pull out of the meet. And then commence, 7 weeks of, I didn't know at the time, but misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis. They thought I had pneumonia. They thought I had an intercostal strain. Like I was borderline like, okay, clearly I am not as tough as I thought I was. If I still can't breathe, I'm trying to train, and I still can't fight through this. Like, I guess I'm just wrong about myself. Like that was how much of a conclusion, because nothing, like doctor after doctor, they would walk in, they'd be like, you look really healthy. Like, wow, you have a great resting heart rate. Like, okay. And so finally I just got angry. I was like, all right, like then do this test. Like, I just want every test out there just to rule everything out. And right then did a blood test, went right to a CAT scan because I had a D-dimer that was elevated, which not expecting everyone to know what all this medical talk is, because I didn't, but it essentially meant that I had 2 blood clots in the bottom of my right lung, and found out that I had a pulmonary embolism, and had to go on blood thinners and all of that. And there are people that continue on after something like that, but the damage that it had done to the scar tissue buildup in my lungs from them being in there for almost 2 months was just enough that even with a 3 to 5% decrease in lung capacity, like we're talking about tenths of a second to make the Olympic team. And so I ultimately had made a comeback to enjoy the process, and I was depressed, crying, upset every day. And finally, December of 2014, I was like, December of 2015, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I tried for almost a year, and it was like, this is not fair to myself, my family, my husband, my coaches. Like, I need to close the book and now move on and decide who I am away from the pool.
Yeah. And so finding that transition period, obviously that was the thing that you loved, you had done your whole life.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you now shifted in? And I'd love to just hear the little bit of story there of like, what what happened from that point forward for those next couple years, which will lead us to some current discussion with where you are now.
Yeah, so it was a tumultuous 5 years. My initial reaction, because of everything that had happened in my career didn't end, of my own accord, was like, I just want to push it away. I'm going to push it down. I'm fine. I'm not going to address any issues. I'm just going to reinvent myself. And, I tried everything. I mean, I thought I was going to be a dietitian. It lasted like 1 semester, and I was like, I hate chemistry. I went into sales and did pretty well, in the fitness industry and sales. I worked in franchising, in operation. Like, I was doing everything, and I didn't want anything to do with, clinics or speaking, or it just was like, if someone brought it up, it was like, yeah, like, but I don't want it. And it manifested itself really negatively. Like, there'd be times I would just start breaking down, or, I would be depressed. And, I think my husband and those loved ones around me knew what was going on, but it was something that they just needed to let me sort through it. And so I think the thing that kept happening was I just kept I didn't have passion. I didn't have that anymore. So of course, and I was trying to force it. Like, I was like, no. Like, I remember one time, like, I still was relentless. So like one time I had this breakdown out of nowhere at work, and it ended up going home, and I was still like in my pipeline sending emails, like bawling. And my husband like came home, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can't get behind with my follow-up. And he was like, but what do you, so even though I like hated it and I felt terrible, like I couldn't stop. Like, I was like, I can't stop. I can't get behind. So like, I still had all those qualities, but like, they just weren't matched to what I was doing at all.
Yeah.
And so I think the turning point for me was, obviously, sometimes time heals all, but I was still ignoring things. And I got this DM in my Instagram from TEDx, and this was 2018. So 3 years had gone by of just kind of wandering aimlessly. And I kind of was starting to feel like, okay, like I need to say yes to more things. I was feeling a bit more open, and they're like, do you want to do a talk? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, ignorance is bliss. Like, not thinking, like, now finding out, looking back, that people hire speech coaches, and like, here I am, and like on vacation a week before, like in Florida, like typing up and like reciting my speech to my in-laws in a kitchen. Like, what? But that was a huge pivotal moment for me, because I delivered this 18-minute speech, and it was about being relentless. And it was the first time that I had admitted publicly how I felt about, my 2008 games, how I felt about my medals. And the reaction was like, I got a standing ovation. The feedback was really great. And not just like a feedback of like, good job. Like, I had people that were speakers that were there that I really, really respected, giving me constructive feedback. And that's what really meant a lot. And I was like, wow, maybe I can speak authentically about my career, and not like, I always felt like it was going to come off as negative or not authentic, or, I wanted to be true to myself, but I didn't want to not say like, yay, everything was amazing. And that was kind of, I kind of then went through another period and then kept fighting. And then finally I was like, all right, I'm doing this. Like, I'm writing a book. I'm going to share my story. And the more I shared my story, the more I realized it was received well. And, quit my corporate job and went all in, and was like, wow, this is I found it again. Like, I just knew, and, was just so happy that I kind of just kept knowing that it was out there. And there were definitely days where I would probably say like, I've lost hope, but I didn't. Like, I kept it alive and kept pushing, and kind of finally found it 5 years later.
I love that. And I love your pointing out that, you tried so many different things for that time period. That's something that, a lot of people, they get in a job and they are kind of feeling stuck. And even if they don't enjoy it, they kind of just feel like they're locked in.
Like, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what they have to do. And I think encouraging people like, look, if you're doing something you don't enjoy, it's not, you don't have to be afraid. Like, go try different things until you find that thing that lets you really be passionate about it. That's where I think the changing moments can happen. And I love hearing that about yours. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing today. That's been the last couple years, right? Since you did that TEDx talk, you wrote your book, which we definitely want to let people know about, Blueprint. We've both read it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
We love your story. So what's your current focus?
Yeah, so I would say I have two current focuses. So yeah, the book came out Black Friday, so this past November. So it's only been, a few months. I guess longer than that now. Wow. So yeah, November, it's March. But so that's come out. I've slowly been working with different corporations, sales kickoffs, speaking to different groups, and that's been really, really fulfilling and fun. And then also became kind of an entrepreneur as well, which I recently actually talked on a podcast, and it was like, I never would have imagined myself as an entrepreneur because my husband is way more wired that way. Because, in swimming, you have a coach. It's kind of like a boss. Like, they're telling you what to do. You do it. I definitely I'm a people pleaser. So I was never the one to like really fight back at anything. And so I felt like, I always thought like, okay, well, structure, someone telling me what to do, like that's how I perform best. Because in my swimming career, which probably wasn't the case, but that was what I thought. And now having the opportunity, my husband and I launched a dryland program business for swimmers, which is a huge need because in every other sport, there's, you have your coach for the sport and you have your coach for strength and conditioning. And that's not the case in swimming, especially in high school, like definitely in college, but not in high school. And, the land component, squats and core strength and stability and balance, all those things are extremely important and a big piece of my success when I swam. And when the pandemic hit, my first reaction was, okay, well, what can these kids control? Because I can talk to them about being positive and believing till it goes back to that. Like, give me something concrete. Like, I can talk to you about being positive and keeping it up and all that. But I was like, I don't feel authentic doing that. Like, if I was in their position, I would be angry. I would be upset. I would be devastated. And I would want to do something to make sure I stayed strong during this period of time. And so I started these live workouts on Zoom, like 2,000 kids jumped on and we all sweated it out and suffered and got stronger. And that kind of morphed into, working with teams and working one-on-one with athletes and, having people kind of subscribe to an app. So it's been a wild ride, but that's been a really fulfilling thing that I never would have imagined, now hearing these kids get back in the pool and be like, yeah, I'm so much stronger, diving in or off the walls, or I feel like I have so much more endurance in my core at the end. Like, it's been kind of a new need that I never knew I possessed or had, and I'm doing it with my husband. So those two things have definitely kind of filled me up in terms of passion and why.
Yeah, I love hearing that refocusing of what can I do in this situation and constantly focusing on that. I think that's so important in any situation, any challenge, anything that you're going at life. Just look at it from that lens and you will get there.
Yeah, and that was the message to these kids all along. Like, look, I get it, but guess what? We're going to do, a minute of mountain climbers and a minute, and we're going to simulate the race. It's going to suck. And, I learned how to speak through pain pretty well, I think, through all of this, because I wanted to do it with them. Like, I didn't want to just tell them to do something and then not have to, go through it myself. So I was, an hour sweating it up, coaching them, but also having to do it myself. So it was rough.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I think entrepreneurship is a natural fit for you. And I think that, even though, like you said, it was like, you didn't know you could, you needed the coach, but at the same time, I think the best qualities for an entrepreneur are somebody who's willing to go through the difficult times, be relentless, and really put your passion into it. And the fact that you've been able to align what you love doing, what you're passionate about, apply the disciplines and the principles and things that you've learned over the years. And now, even in a way that, like you just said, you're still getting to interact with and do the things that you love, not just talk about it, but talk about it, show it, train it, do it's such a perfect fit for you. That's awesome to hear what you have going on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's I feel like that, you always hear people talk about that, like, oh, it just happened, it just, and you never know when it's going to happen. And, we came up with the name Synergy in my parents' kitchen, and we were like, well, we wanted to include, multifaceted nutrition, sleep, load, all these different things, and not just focus on the pool. And we're like, that looks like a good word. I feel like that in cap. And then, yeah, all right. And then from there, it happened. So, it's cool to kind of live out what you hear so many successful entrepreneurs talk about. And obviously we're not established. We're in our first year. We're still building. We're still getting, better and changing things. But to have that kind of aha moment that I've heard so many people talk about was really, really neat. And I think I wouldn't have been ready to do that sooner than that moment, because I hadn't embraced, I didn't even want to talk about swimming, right? Like, I hadn't embraced my past yet. And so to have kind of the book be the piece that allowed me to embrace everything, and then everything, when the pandemic happened, which was obviously not a good thing, but it almost, I was almost able to kind of flip it to be a positive thing in terms of allowing me time to get my head around everything. So.
Yeah. Love that.
There is such a need right now also for, doing something physical and switching it up and thinking of, okay, you can't train in the pool. What can you do? And I don't know. I think all too often we get into our own heads and we're like, well, I used to do it this way, and that's not an option now, so I'll just give up. But to hear the reframing every time, it clicks in, and it's something amazing. If you getting to this point in your life, your career, if you were to go back 10 years, I'm kind of curious, what would you tell yourself, or what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I would say two, and I always turn to these two. The first one, and it's going to sound cliche, but I'm going to dig deeper, and it's not as cliche. So the first one is just being able to be in the moment and enjoy. And I don't mean from, just like in the moment, like every day you have small wins, right? Like I was actually pretty good at that, like being able to establish, all right, these are my wins for the day. Awesome. Check, check, check. Good to go. More like when all of those little wins add up to a bigger win, like at a meet, whether it's world championships or even a meet during the season, taking a second and being like, wow, like you just accomplished this, instead of being like next step, next step, next step. And that happened a lot. And especially when I was younger, even at the Olympic Games, I broke an American record, and it was like, okay, next race, like I got to warm down, like flippantly, I broke an American record. And and so that was just kind of how I was trained, how I was wired. And it happens to this day. My husband and I talk about, we're like, we are so bad at enjoy the moment for a second. That doesn't mean that you've given up on the next step or anything, but like celebrate what you've been working for. Because like otherwise, like what's the point? Have a celebration for a day. Like it's okay. And I didn't do a good job of that throughout my career, and that was definitely part of why I wanted to make a comeback, because I felt like I had the maturity and perspective to be able to do that better, not perfect, but better. So I would say that's one. And then I would say two is being able to trust my intuition better. I talked about this, like a coach tells you what to do and that's what you do. And but you're not a robot. Like felt like it sometimes, but I think being able to trust when you have a feeling of, this is the move I should make, and trust that a lot of your excellence is coming from you. And I think a lot of times within my career at certain points, it was like, well, it's because of this program or this coach or this X or this Y. Like it was never like, okay, like you're doing it. Like it's coming from you regardless of where you are, you're going to be successful. And I think that there were times when I wish I had made a move quicker or kind of empowered myself to, voice an opinion or stand up. And I think that's something that's like, I love mentoring girls. It's something else I do because I think that's such an important thing. And I think girls need to do that more. And I think sometimes it's in everyone's nature, but I think sometimes it's not as, I don't know what the word is. It's just not, it doesn't happen as naturally sometimes. And so that's definitely something I do more today, but I wish I had done it 10 years ago.
That's amazing. Yeah, two great points.
With the first point where you're talking about celebrating those victories, I think I relate with that so much of like getting through and checking it off and having the day-to-day, but not having that long-term, like you just accomplished something massive. And to your point, when you do celebrate those massive wins, when you actually chain all of those leading goals up to the massive goal, that only gives you more momentum. When you take the time to like really embody that and you're like, I just leveled up. Okay, now I can move forward with even more momentum rather than just turning it back into a small, like, yeah, it was a win, moving on. Yeah.
Love it. And I love the intuition part. We talk about like how we learn, we read books and things, but if we don't implement, but I think that intuition piece of not nobody has the perfect answer for you, right? You can't have a coach, you can't do a certain training that's like perfect for you. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own perspectives, their own unique. And when they take that opportunity to take the risk to, maybe even go against certain advices at time, which is scary.
Yeah.
I think that's, mixing that with all the things we've talked about today, with the deep down, with applying the passion, but also trusting in what you see or things that you feel you need to do. I think that's when greatness is born.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's also kind of crazy hearing all of the things that you talk about. And I'm like, how could she have never understood that she was meant to be an entrepreneur? Because you were like this is the business plan for a person. You're like, you have all the traits, you had them, you were applying them in such a unique way in the beginning of your life. But it's like, no, she's doing this, she's enjoying the process. She's like talking about, I'm like, of course she would.
Check.
Yes.
I'm like, of course you would end up talking to Jesse Itzler, and he's like, yeah, you're in the group.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. Like, I think that was just something that I just always thought. I was just like, no, like I could never do that. Like, take risk. It's like, take risk. Like, what am I doing in like my entire skiing career? But I was like, no, that's just too risky. Like, I could, and again, the same thing. Like, I didn't get it because I hadn't found something that I was passionate.
Yeah.
It always starts with that. And so once I found that, it's like, okay, everything else is going to fall into place and you're going to figure it out on the go. And like, it's not like my husband and I sat down and we're like, all right, we're going to start a business. Day one, business plan.
Right.
Like that's just not how it happens. And so I think that's what was missing. And that's why I had this ingrained thing. And then it was like, had to hit me in the face and be like, oh, okay, like cool, and I think it's helpful to obviously have a partner, and my husband is really, he brings his strengths and I bring mine, but yeah. Right.
That's amazing. Well, we're excited to continue to watch your journey and share it out with our audience. And anything else you want to leave with the listeners today before we wrap up?
I think just something that's really important is don't feel bad if you don't have that thing yet. And I think sometimes there's so much talk, whether it's on social media or on podcasts or in books, where it's just like everyone talks about, I have this passion, I have this thing. And so sometimes I think it can make people who don't have that feel like, well, what's wrong with me? And that's why I don't know if I love it, but sometimes it's painful. But like, I think it's important to talk about the times when 5 years of what is happening, I'm crying, I'm upset, I'm lost, it takes a really long time. And so don't feel bad, like keep fighting, keep the hope alive, keep pushing, keep trying different things, because it will ultimately click. And it probably is going to click like right when you're about to give up. Like that's what happened to me. I was like, oh my God, like I'm never going to find it again. Like, but I just kept inching forward step by step. And then it clicked. So that would be my number one piece of advice.
I love that share, and I think that's one word you got to throw in there is being patient with the process. You can apply the passion, you can apply the discipline and the deep down, but knowing that even then it doesn't, you don't accomplish your dreams in that year, right?
Yeah.
Like this is a journey, no matter what it is that you're going to go toward. Those, unicorn moments or companies of, it launched, it blew up in a day, or someone became an overnight success. Usually there's something that led up to that process that you just didn't get to see. It's the highlight reel.
Yeah.
You got to be patient with that. Well, I love that last share. We appreciate you coming and sharing with us. We look forward to watching your journey and being along with you.
Thank you so much. You guys are awesome.